Hi, everybody. So I always get asked questions about how to be successful in my A&P courses or in an A&P course, how to study, how to take tests. And I thought this semester I'd finally make hopefully a short video going over some of the things that I routinely tell students when they come to me and ask me for help. So this PowerPoint should be available to you, hopefully, depending on how I'm providing you with this video, but I should have some way of linking it through your Canvas. So in this video, what I'm going to do is go through a couple of things. Like one, what are some behaviors that you want to exhibit in order to be a successful A&P student? And to me, success is that you understand and learn the material. Because you understand and learn the material, you should be getting good grades as a result of that. But sometimes you understand and learn the material and you're just too stuck in your head, and then you make bad choices on homework questions or quiz questions. So that's why we're going to go over a couple of really good behaviors that you should think about doing. But also then number one is like study techniques, like how do you study? Listen, nobody teaches anybody how to study. When you walk into college the first time, you think you have an idea of what studying is, and that's usually not what studying is. You have to develop a technique for studying. So I'll go over a couple of things that are passive techniques versus active techniques. And what you want to think about is how to actively study. Then I'll go over maybe some test taking strategies, things to think about when you take your quizzes or when you're actually sitting in the exam. What should you do? And lastly, other ways to think about getting help for this class. Don't be afraid to ask for help. You should ask for help if you need that help. Okay, so first thing is successful behaviors in A&P. I modified a performance prognosis activity that was something that I was given as a result of a professional development class that I was taking. I'm currently taking. This performance prognosis activity will be provided to you in Canvas as well. And it basically is going to be a list of behaviors, which I'll pull up right now. Okay, so I pulled up my performance prognosis inventory or activity. You can download this from Canvas, and it's basically an editable PDF where you're just going to click on boxes or toggle. And you can see there's a lot of different statements that you want to think about. Are you currently doing this? If you're currently doing this, make a little checkbox. And you're going to go through everything here and think about, are you doing any of these things? How many of these things are you doing? At the end of that, you want to go over your results and you're going to say, okay, well, if I'm doing all 16 things, then I predict that I should be getting like an A in this class. If I'm doing very few things, then you're predicting that you're going to get a lower score in the class. Then if you're not happy with your predicted grade, go back through this behavioral list and check additional things that you're going to add to your behaviors. Things like, I'm going to take better notes in class. I'm going to review after 24 hours. I'm going to use the check your understanding at the end of the week to go over the PowerPoint material. All of these things are things that good students or students who get good grades do on a regular basis, okay? Because success actually takes work. You're going to have to put in the time and the effort and the energy and the work in order to be successful in this class or any class, actually. You can use this for any class that you're taking. So those are some behaviors that you want to think about doing. So do that, okay? Then what you can do is think about, I'm not doing any of those things because I don't know what studying is. And I've never had to study before because, in high school, I didn't have to take tests because I did my homework and the homework was pretty easy, or even the tests were pretty easy. You just want to think about, there are a lot of different study techniques and everybody studies differently. So here are some of the things that have been most effective for me personally as I went through my college experience. Something, again, I had to try to figure out. My first year of college did not go very well because I didn't know how to study. So I had to figure out, how am I going to study to be more successful in my courses? In particular, my very first biology class I took, I did not do very well on. And afterwards, I had to figure it out. And my biology course was in a quarter system. So it was a 10-week class that had like probably 600 or 700 or more students in it. Okay. So what you want to think about doing is maybe teach to somebody else. I always get asked, how come you know this material? How come you remember all this material? A lot of it is repetition and vocalization. It has to do with, if I have to teach this all week long, then I've said it once, I've said it twice, I've said it 3 times. And even though the way I say it might be a little bit different, the overall idea is still the same. The concepts are still the same. So you want to vocalize that when you repeat it, or when you do your repetition, because it makes sure that you understand how parts go together. You can write it out, but sometimes your brain kind of turns off when you're writing. Whereas when you're vocalizing, you have to think about, what is the next word I'm going to say? How am I going to put those concepts together? Normally, when I teach my courses, I actually draw and label everything. If you're in one of my courses where I use PowerPoints, it kills me because I don't usually use PowerPoint. And that's why I have supplemental videos, because I draw and label everything. And this is how I learned anatomy and physiology, by getting onto the whiteboard and drawing stuff out. So I recommend going and buying yourself a little tiny whiteboard and a couple of, expos in different colors, and start to label out processes, draw bones, any of those things, and do it over and over and over and over again. Okay. And ask yourself questions as you're doing that. I try to create as many mnemonic devices for myself as I can. I create concept maps and charts for comparisons, and sometimes I provide those to you guys or ask you to do it in homeworks, because this is the best way to figure out what things go together, or what things are similar and what things are different. And in A&P, that is really big concepts to understand. How are things the same and how are things going to be different? And then I always have a check your understanding section at the back of my PowerPoints. I have heard complaints about this. I don't know why you wouldn't use that. It's no different than in a textbook. At the back, there's a bunch of questions for you to answer. Did you read and understand? The same thing with my PowerPoint. Did you come to lecture? Did you take notes? Did you read this? Do you understand it? Can you write answers to these questions? And I'm not talking about a simple sentence. I'm talking about a thorough couple sentences, going in depth as much as you possibly can, because you have to teach it to somebody else. Then don't just answer the question. You want to think about how to create your own written questions from the material, and then how to create your own multiple choice questions. The minute you start making questions is the minute you have to think about how concepts go together, how things are different, and how things are the same. So do those sorts of things, and it can actually be better for you in terms of effective study techniques. You don't have to spend hours making flashcards. You just can spend an hour with your whiteboard. And the hour with your whiteboard is actually more engaging than an hour of 500 flashcards. Okay, so that leads me to a couple of passive versus active learning techniques. Passive learning techniques really are not engaging your brain. And you need to engage your brain in order to put that information in it. Think about a memory in your life. You still have a memory of that because you integrated multiple things together, and then you think about it, and maybe smell brings that memory back, or a sound brings that memory back. When you learn, you have to do the same thing. You have to engage your neurons in order to remember stuff. So you can see passive things are, maybe you watched a YouTube video. Actually, I forgot to put that on this list. Maybe you just created flashcards and you reviewed them. Flashcards sometimes, though, are better for dates. They're better for definitions. In a class like this where you have processes, you have lots of words, you have those words kind of look the same but are a little bit different. Flashcards can just be a massive undertaking with not really a great after effect, basically, or effect. So just very passive things like, oh, I audio recorded the lecture and I just listened to it on repeat. I mean, you listen to a song on repeat, but that doesn't mean you remember all of the lyrics all of the time, right? So you want to do more active things. When you come to lecture, actively take notes. When you read, actively take notes. Write it down, okay? Typing it out is also okay, but you need to actually physically do something. Check your notes with everybody else because maybe your notes have something missing, so see what you missed. Rephrase stuff in your own words to the best of your ability. If you take the PowerPoint and there's something on there and you rephrase it in your own words, it's actually going to stick a little bit better. Here again, I have teaching concepts. You don't have to find somebody to teach to. You could just sit in an empty room and talk to yourself. And I know you think, oh my gosh, I'll be crazy, but only if somebody hears you. And that's the most effective thing. You're going to teach yourself the material. You're going to ask yourself questions. You're going to answer those questions. And it starts your brain to think about how to make those connections together. Now, I always try to get students not to use flashcards, but if you insist on using flashcards, you can't just have one side and the other side. You need to have one side and the other side, but you need to think about how to ask yourself questions about that. If you have a process like an embryology process, if you have nerve impulses, muscle contractions, make sure you ask yourself questions as you go through those flashcards. Again, concept maps, comparison charts, reviewing questions, creating your own questions, and then using your own personal examples are all going to make things stick a lot better. You can watch a YouTube video, but you should take notes over it. And then you should try to think about how to use those concepts rather than just watching the video. Don't think that you're going to watch a 12-minute crash course video and that's going to get you an A on the test. It's going to maybe help you understand concepts you didn't understand, but it's not going to be enough to get you through multiple choice questions or written questions. So those are a couple of study techniques. Think about going over that activity also and looking at some of the behaviors and ticking off some of those different behaviors that you want to maybe do. And here I should have also put get a whiteboard. Get a whiteboard. Make your own videos. When you're in lab, make a video of yourself going through parts because that's vocalization. Then you can watch it again. You can turn off the sound. And can you go over those parts again? Watch it forwards, watch it backwards, watch it in the middle. Though I mean, you guys are lucky. You have iPads, you have cell phones, you have voice recorders, you have all of these things at your disposal to your advantage. Use them if you have them, or even if you have just a pen and a paper, use that to your advantage also. The other big thing is you studied, but then you got to the test and you're like, damn, I did not do well on that test. A lot of times it comes down to test taking strategies. How are you going to read the question, think about the answer, and pull the knowledge out of your brain? One, do not study at 3 a.m. before your test. Your brain needs sleep. It actually needs sleep in order to clean out the waste material that is collected because of your cells going through metabolism. Without sleep, you don't function properly. So when you don't sleep and then you come take a test, you should assume you're not going to do very well on that test. Study early, study often, study frequently. Okay, and then come and ask questions. So while you're doing your test, you want to think about a couple of things. You want to read the whole question. I do this, everybody does this, where your brain just kind of fills in parts. You need to snap back into it and then start to think about like circling certain features of the question and the answers. So here I have an example of a question. What features do all eukaryotic cells have? I'm going to circle features, all eukaryotic cells. So I'm thinking about all the features, every feature that all eukaryotic cells have, and then I'm going to go through my list of answers, and I'm going to think about, will they all have to have this? Like every eukaryotic cell. every eukaryotic cell in the human body, or any eukaryotic cell that is plant or animal. That's what a eukaryotic cell is. Okay, read through the important parts of question or of answers. These answers are pretty simplistic because they're just features, but if you have a long process, circle some of those things. And then you want to go through and cross out any answers that are not possible or not correct, like mitochondria and nucleus here. I got to have more than a nucleus in mitochondria. The cell membrane only. I gotta have more than the cell membrane. I know that I have to have a cell membrane and a nucleus because all eukaryotic cells have a nucleus. So you could go through and say nucleus, nucleus, nucleus. Okay, so it has to be one of those three answers. This one doesn't say nucleus, so I'm gonna get rid of that one. And I'm not gonna just have mitochondria and a nucleus, so I got rid of that one. So I'm at 50-50 now. And a lot of times the 50-50 is where it comes down to where you guys do have this 50-50 and you didn't study enough, and so you don't know which answer to pick. This is where studying is helpful and useful. This is where you have to study and you have to start to think and process what you're looking at. Draw yourself a little picture. Oh, there's my cell, there's my nucleus, there's my cell membrane, but I have this space here also. So here I have to pick C because I hopefully remember cytoplasm is also a necessary feature. So draw stuff out on your test, use your mnemonic devices on your test, and then sometimes what happens is you fill out your Scantron incorrectly. So always try to circle on the test if you can, and then fill out your Scantron. And if you have time at the end of the test, go back through your test, go back through your Scantron, and make sure those things are correct. If you don't know a question, if you don't know an answer to a question, maybe you star it and come back to it later. Some people like to do all the easier questions or the questions they find easier first, and then they go to the harder ones later. You just have to be careful about your time period. If you spent too much time on the easy ones, you don't have enough time to go back and look at all the hard ones, depending on how many hard or easy ones there are in the test. So think about that, okay? Everybody gets test anxiety. Everybody does. It's part of your fight or flight mechanism in your body. Stress causes that. And your heart's going to palpitate. Your hands are going to sweat. Your brain's going to stop functioning completely. The best way to deal with anxiety is preparation. Prepare, prepare, prepare. If you feel like you're prepared, you might have high anxiety, but as soon as you read the questions, you're going to be like, yes, I got this. I hope so anyway. Okay. Try not to drink caffeine before your test. That's just going to cause more anxiety because your heart's going to race a little bit more. Get plenty of sleep before you take your test. So what if you do this test, the study strategies, the test taking strategies, and you still are not doing well in the class? You need to make sure you ask for help. Often your instructors are going to have a lot of students. I have a lot of students. I wish I could reach out to every single person individually and say, hey, you didn't do very well. Come see me in office hours. I can't do that, but I want you to all know, come and talk to me, come to office hours, and we can look over how you've been preparing. If you're afraid to go to office hours, think about if there's supplemental instruction. Make an appointment with a tutor, but you need to make sure you're always prepared. So when you come to office hours, what are your questions? Did you write them out? When you go to a tutor, what are your questions? Did you write them out? Please don't just go to the tutor with your check your understanding and be like, can we answer all these together? You should answer them first, and then the tutor will help you with if your answer is good or if your answer is bad. The same thing when you come to my office hours. I'll go over it with you and I'll help you, but I'm not going to give you answers. Okay. When you get your test back, if you have an opportunity to look at your results and go through your results, I highly recommend you do this because it will help you with better test taking strategies. A lot of times students come to me, they look at their test and they say, you know what, I just didn't read this one, or this one correctly. So it's like 3 questions you didn't read fully. Or there are 3 questions you bubbled in incorrectly because you were like off on your Scantron. Those things help you become a better test taker when you actually look at the test in a low stress situation. You took your test, you're not stressed out or anxious anymore. You come back and read it and go, I knew the answer to that, but I changed my answer. Often don't change your answer. Sometimes you guys overthink it and you're like, no, it's a trick. It's never a trick. It shouldn't be a trick. It's just whether or not you know and understand the material. If you do, you usually get the right answer, but then you talk yourself out of your answer. Try to talk yourself into why your answer is correct and why the other ones should be incorrect. If you can't do that, then you need to think about the questions a little bit more. So make sure you ask for help if you need that help, okay? So I hope this kind of helps you think about test taking strategies, study strategies a little bit more, but I want you to understand success takes work. This class takes work. It takes a lot of outside class time, a lot of outside class time. It is not going to be you study for an hour and you're going to know everything. You're going to have to study for multiple hours every week for lecture and for lab. You want to work smarter though, and not harder. Working harder is spending 5 hours on flashcards when you could have spent 5 hours on a whiteboard or vocalizing stuff or going over questions. So think about that. Active studying actually usually requires you to do less time in, but you get more benefit out of it. So working harder would be watching, your YouTube video repetitively, listening to your audio lecture repetitively. That's harder because it's not going to sink into your brain, essentially. That should be more like, don't work longer. You want to work smarter, but you don't want to work for a longer period of time. Yes, you need that time, but you don't want to spend your time on just doing passive, weird things like listening or reading the textbook over and over again. You want to study regularly, consistently, and actively. Don't assume that you're going to study, the day before your test and you're going to be okay. You want to put in some time every week at the end of the week, going over lecture information, and then, a couple of days before your test, 3, 4, 5 days before your test, you really hammer your studying harder, going over those concepts again. If you study early, when you go back and look at concepts before the exam, you'll be like, oh, I remember this. If you don't do that, you're not going to remember everything and you have to study. You have to study harder, okay? Just think about, if you are not getting the grade that you want in this class, to do something different. Don't just say, well, it's okay, I'll use my flashcards again, because if you use flashcards in the beginning and you did it again, you're probably going to get the same result. Did you come to office hours? Did you ask for help? Did you make a study group? When you make a study group, you should have like a leader for every time you go to your study group and have that leader say, we're going to work on these questions. So for, 1 hour or 2 hours, we're going to go over the answers to all these questions. And then we can take a break and go to Starbucks and then we can study for a little bit more. You need to have like consistent routine so that it doesn't just become you guys hanging out, chilling, talking about whatever. So just think about all those things. Try to do the performance prognosis right now, and then also do it again at the end of your first test. Come ask me any questions if you haven't.